Thank you, Herr Kusele. Yeah, I'd like to welcome you, and I may introduce Mr. Christopher Drexler. Please put away your iPhone. So you all should put away your iPhones, please. Christopher Drexler is Councillor of Styria for Culture and Health, and sort of spirit of this meeting, right? Somehow. Alfred Gusenbauer, former Chancellor, and now very successful in different types of business. I don't know why you're laughing. He's quite successful, believe me. Wolfgang Danspeckgruber isn't with us, but Erhard Busek, he's also, please, putting away his iPhone. Former Vice Chancellor. Okay, my authority isn't that good. On my right side is Mark Pacheco. He's your state senator and specialized on climate warming, which is a good coincidence today, I think. Edward Rhodes is Professor for International Relations and State Organization at George Mason University. And I'm sure you all know Hannelore Veit. She's US correspondent in Washington. I don't know why you are here. You should be in Washington right now, no? Yes. We are, but yeah. So, well, will start rain, but we are very grateful that you're here and can explain us a little bit of Mr. Trump. Hannelore Veit wrote, Europe and the United States, it hasn't been this exciting for a long time. People in Europe have more or less recovered from the initial shock. That was too optimistic, right?
Sorry, I think we had another shock last week when we had the president here in Europe. The way he behaved, the way the things that he stressed, he just showed that Europe doesn't interest him. He doesn't care, and I think. The German Chancellor summed it up very well when she said, okay, we have to think about how to go ahead, and we have to come back, we have to be the ones who are leading the show now. We cannot rely on the United States anymore.
Okay, we'll come back to this topic in a few minutes. Before that, I'd like to ask you, Senator, will he announce the withdrawal or not today? I don't know, but
I think we'll all find out at about 9 o'clock at the wine cellar. And that's might be a good place for all of us to be. Let me just say, I hope he does not. I hope that he decides to stay in the Paris Agreement. It is extremely important, in my opinion, to remain involved and to be very aggressive in terms of trying to fight the worst effects of global climate change. And the overwhelming majority of the American people feel that way. In recent polling that has been done all across the United States, in every state, the majority of the citizens believe that we should remain in the Paris Agreement. Some 37 states in the United States today have active climate planning going on. Many have state laws that have been passed. There are targets and goals that are in place. So unfortunately, if the president decides not to stay in the Paris Agreement, I must say I believe that in many of our states, that will initiate even a greater emphasis on moving forward. There will be greater resistance in terms of moving away from something that the entire world has come together on. America has always tried to lead, and this is a time in our world history where we really need that to continue. Whether or not that will take place, I have no idea as to what the president will be saying today. At our time here, it would be around 9 o'clock this evening, well, he will make that announcement, and we'll all find out a little later on today. But I just want to assure you, in particular in Massachusetts, California, the coastal states in the West Coast, all up and down the East Coast, except for when you get past South Carolina, but there'll be significant emphasis on continuing to move forward. Make no mistake about that. And so you'll see the leadership come from the state level on this particular issue. If the president decides not to stay in, the states will double down and move forward on this issue, I believe.
So how big would be the effect if he withdraws, if he doesn't stay?
Well, if he decides not to stay in, let me give you an example. The front page of the Boston Globe yesterday. We have been planning for some time. Secretary Kerry, when he was Secretary of State, had announced that the Chinese would be holding a forum in Boston on climate change and about the solutions that they are working with the Americans, with the Europeans, with people all around the world to try to achieve the climate goals that were set in the Paris Agreement. And now, whether or not that forum will be held or not, with a entity, the United States, that may be pulling out of the agreement, the Chinese are deciding whether or not they will actually come. So these types of things will start to happen, unfortunately, and I would employ all of us here and those in Europe, regardless of what the president does, the relationships that we already have together, in particular at the state level, let us continue to build upon those relationships going forward, not walk away from them. Because in our system, we have a president, but it's for 4 years. And we have, leaders in our system of federalism at the national, state, and local level. There are amazing things going on right now in America at the city level, big city level. New York City, Boston, Los Angeles. I mean, it's amazing what is taking place. And these are where the major population centers are in America. And so we're able to see significant achievement towards meeting these Paris goals. If you look at California by itself, if it was its own country, it would probably be the 5th largest economy in the world. So we can move forward, we can do this together, even if it means we have to do it maybe in an unconventional way and do it through the states. If we get that cooperation going back and forth, we can be successful.
Albert Rhodes, you're smiling.
Without disagreeing with Mark, I tend to think, Mark, you're a little bit over-optimistic. I agree that the density of ties between Europe and America is extraordinary, both in the governmental ties, but also in the private sector. The number of business-to-business ties, the economic ties, the cultural ties, all of these, I think, will serve us well. I do think, however, on the climate issues, this will be one of the many issues on which America is not a leader. And as sorry as I am to say it, historically, America is typically not the leader on many international initiatives. Our system of government makes dramatic initiatives quite difficult. Sometimes I'm sorry about that, but on other days like today, I'm glad that sometimes it's difficult for the American government to move forward, because the direction in which it might move forward would disappoint all of us. But I do think while some of the state governments, like yours, Mark, in Massachusetts, or the government in California may be quite aggressive in this area, I do think, for the most part, American governments will move slowly, and I suspect that President Trump when he makes decisions on issues like climate control, will be very much looking to how it will play with his own domestic political base. And while a majority of Americans do feel that global warming, climate change is happening and is an issue to be concerned about, it doesn't have the same kind of priority for most Americans, or the same kind of resonance for most Americans that it does over here in Europe. So it is quite possible and frequent for Americans to say climate change is terrible, and then to reject all measures that might tend to slow it or reverse it. So without disagreeing, I think this is an issue on which America, especially American business and American industry, will play an important positive role. I'm much less optimistic than you are, Mark, that we're going to be keeping pace with our European friends on this issue. I think we'll be lagging behind.
Thank you. Alfred Gusenbauer. Optimistic?
I'm always optimistic, of course. This is one of the basic elements of our struggle for survival, but with a note of realism. And I have to say I'm a little bit worried about the debate that is emerging throughout the last days, especially what concerns its magnitude and its fundamental character. Because the trip of the US president to Europe, well, was not the biggest success, let's put it like that. But not all what he said was entirely inappropriate. I think it's not a provocation if the US president asks the European NATO partners to contribute more to common security and defense, especially if some of the most successful countries in their economic performance are not even reaching the 2% contributional limit that was agreed upon. And I think it's not inappropriate to put things like that on the table. On the other hand, of course, maybe it was not the smartest move in a situation where we have quite some tensions with Russia, not to show the support to the Baltic states and the readiness of the US to stand in for Article 5 of the NATO treaty. And what is especially worrying about is that in the draft for his speech, it was agreed that there will be a sentence like that, but at the end he didn't do it, which I thought was a little bit erratic and created quite some confusion, as the behavior of the US president in some of his appearances, mainly by matters of behavior, is creating more irritation than by matters of content. Because, let's face it, I'm not a natural-born supporter of the president. But if you compare the first month before this trip with all what he said during the electoral campaign, I have to confess this offers already a certain relief, because what you could expect on basis of his agitation throughout the electoral campaign, this would have really been a mere catastrophe. And the catastrophe so far didn't happen. And I think that the Europeans and also the international audience are a little bit disappointed that their own expectations about the behavior of the US president was not confirmed by action throughout the first months of this year. And now looking forward for events that could be interpreted as at least a partial confirmation of what they thought is going to happen. This is why this trip to Europe is blown up in a way that goes beyond any limits. I mean, if now even, a very lucid man, at least in economics. Martin Wolf in the Financial Times is writing that the Americans are going to end the world order that they have built themselves. And people start to take the words of Angela Merkel, by the way, in a beer tent, as, let's say, the change of European politics. Hey, give me a break. What is going to change? A Europe that cannot agree on refugee numbers, a Europe that cannot agree on how to make its own currency work. These countries are now going to contribute more to the defense and security in order to build up their own systems. So we will rely on ourselves, build command and control structures for which we are going to need 20 years, and they will not be up of the level that the US is contributing to NATO today. So, friends, let's be a little bit serious and not take any remark in a beer tent as a signal for the change of history. I think that the Western order is without alternative for us, based on human rights and the rule of law and of democracy. All this talk about we should move closer to China and whatsoever, in my understanding, excuse my French, is complete bullshit. And everybody who is soberly addressing the question, how can you think that on basis of a democratically elected president who is in office for 4 years, but or maybe longer, but with still strong institutions in the US, that this could be faced by an alternative of a communist, authoritarian state that still is not obeying the human rights. So please, let's put all that into perspective, stop the debate about the end of the Western world, and try to develop a conversation how in these difficult days where US president tends to have ambitions that are not very internationalist, they are not very pro-European, to maintain the institutional and political relations that are the fundament of the political order that was offering peace, security, and wealth in Europe since 1945.
Thank you. Imagine you would be Austrian Chancellor and speak like this.
I was not talking different.
No.
The only difference is that then you didn't like it, because in Austria you have to be off to be liked by the journalists.
That's true, yeah. Christopher Drexler, you're still in politics.
Yeah, thank you. I'm still in, and I hope for some years. Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And first of all, I wanted to express I agree absolutely with Chancellor Gusenbauer. I think there are at least 2 points I'd like to stress. First of all, it's not the end of the West, and it's not the end of any Western or transatlantic partnership. We talked about it yesterday, and too many people think the United States are the president, and that's it. And that's absolutely wrong. I'm very happy to have a state senator on my left side, because it's a very important point to express the role of the states in the United States. In Europe and in Austria in particular, we don't have, we do not see what, how important the states are in the United States. And so we will have, in the afternoon, we will talk about federalism and government. In Austria, federalism always is a very evil thing, especially in the presse. But
I told them before that media critic we should stop then. Yeah.
But You talked about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, your state, California. I think it's about a decade ago. It was a decade ago when Governor Schwarzenegger made all these things about climate change and special strips for hybrid vehicles and all these stuff 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I don't know any special strips for electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles in Austria. So we always tend to have a very simple view of the world. Europe, the good guys in climate change policies, the good guys in human rights, the good guys in nearly everything. The US, the bad guys. So, did Europe reduce the carbon dioxide emissions after Kyoto? Yes or no? No. Did the US? Yes. So, I mean, it's quite interesting, I guess. I know per capita it's very high and all this stuff, but they did reduce, probably due to fracking. Okay, fracking is also evil, but they did reduce. We did not. So I think we need a realistic view to all these topics. Especially in terms of climate change, and this is one of the greatest challenges for mankind, entire mankind. Okay, and second point, again, the states. I think it's very important to have relations on the state level, for instance. I always enjoyed my trips to the US in terms of state level, meeting state level politicians. Yesterday I mentioned the National Conference of State Legislatures, which is very, from my point of view, very important partner in these terms, in transatlantic terms. And so we could learn from you. I mean, a kind of a new phase of federalism. Try good things, try better things, and yeah, kind of award. Who does the best things in climate change? In Massachusetts, Styria, Bavaria, and not always in United States and Germany and Austria and European Union. So this could be a new point of view.
Mr. Busek, did Europe need Mr. Trump to find our strength, our military, our security?
I would propose to change the approach to the whole theme. I'm looking here, there's written a dialogue, a Pentecost dialogue, spirit and presence and so on and so on. And I think we should leave this thinking by day. I think, okay, Trump will deliver a message. It will be immediately forgotten after a week or more. We are waiting for the next message given by Trump, what he's twittering and so on and so on. And we are deeply impressed, and so we have some desire, an interesting desire. Let me say, Karl Kraus said it nearly 100 years ago, Austria is a test station for doomsday. I think now we are looking forward to be a test station for doomsday. Everything is the end of everything, and so on and so on. But the world is still existing. I'm quite sure tomorrow also. So far it's quite better to discuss what is really necessary. And you might wonder, I'm extremely grateful for Donald Trump. Because he is a kick in the ass of the Europeans to consider what they want to do by themselves, for themselves, what is their position in the global context. I think that's the real question. I think it is to be always angry and to criticize Trump is a substitute for real consideration what we shall do concerning the problems. I think Gusenbauer touched it rightly. I think the climate problem is a general problem with the Americans, without the Americans, and we have to do anyway on this subject, and maybe we have discussion with others. Let's wait, and Trump might pass by, and you described it rightly concerning the American situation, which is more differentiated. I think sometimes I'm the impression the only American existing is Trump. I'm quite sure I've been there, it's not true. There are also some others existing. With other perspectives and so on and so on. So I think to change the subject, it would be quite necessary to say on which subjects we Europeans can be together. That's a real problem. It's not to discuss the European Union and what treaty is necessary and so on and so on. I think we need a further agreement in depth on some questions. I think I'm really fed up about, it's always mentioned, the European values. I'm always eager to ask those who are saying is, please tell me what the European values are. And maybe a lot of those pronouncing it would be very quiet immediately. That does not mean that they are all idiots. I think it's necessary to go deeper in the discussion and to look for the real content. And in this sense, Trump is helpful. Okay, many thanks, Donald. And let's continue on our own, in our own obligations for future to move forward here on this subject.
But do you think that will happen in Europe?
Pardon?
Do you think that that will happen in Europe?
It has to happen. For the moment, it's not happening. Quite clear. But it's not a reason to say, for the moment it's not happening, it will not happen. I think we have to do, there are a lot of people here, including myself, we have to contribute on this subject to raise this question and to go further on. That's for sure quite necessary, and may I say it's challenging. It's more nice than to talk about doomsday, because doomsday is no perspective. But looking for solutions and looking for changes is necessary. I think maybe following the American example and look to some European example, we have to discuss how is democracy today working. Maybe the models we are using are a little bit outdated. I don't know the alternative for the moment, but it's quite necessary, I think, to discuss it in which way discussions are done. Security is mentioned here. I think we have to consider we are amidst the beginning of the Third World War. It's creeping in by terrorism and so on, not in the way. I think it's always a nonsense. We are in a certain way celebrating the beginning of the First World War. Emperor Franz Joseph declared it. And we are looking to the movies about the Second World War. Hitler, since 545, it will be shot back. I think here we are starting in midst of a new kind of a world war which cannot be fighted alone with 2% of the GDP. I think we are missing the techniques concerning it. Not needs maybe more intelligence that is really existing. The real message is not the 2%. The real message is that in every case which is happening in Europe, the announcement is coming that the security services of the different countries are not cooperating. They are not delivering that what they are known to the other. And obviously they are happy by this. Where is here the political control on the results of such institutions? It costs a lot of money, maybe more than 2% of the GDP. It's also true for Austria. I'm admiring our defense minister looking for for tanks and looking for helicopters and so on and so on. I wish him all the best. If one terrorist with a belt is coming with a tank, he can hinder him? No, it's not true. I think we have the wrong discussion on this subject. And I'm not bashing the medias. Sometimes I'm
Go ahead. That's okay.
I think
that's okay.
I'm giving you the honor mentioning the medias. I think it's a mistake which we are doing all together on this. It may be an invitation, I think, to do by Geist and Gegenwart, I think to change a little bit the subject, not only to look to actual things, but in depth, what is really necessary to handle these problems. Full stop.
Thank you. Hannelore, Veit, I think you wanted to answer.
I just wanted to add.
Add, agree, disagree, please.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No,
What is the
go
question?
ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add to what both of you said, talking about democratic institutions, and you were saying about Trump not really doing as much as he thought he would do. For me, it also shows that the American system of checks and balances is working. There is the power of the president, but he's very, very limited. He's controlled by Congress. Congress is controlling Trump. Let's take the example of the wall. He wants to build a wall to Mexico. Somebody has to pay for that wall. He said Mexico will pay. Mexico said certainly not. He said, okay, Congress will give me money, I will get it back from the Mexicans. Congress is saying, wait a minute, not so fast. There is not $1 for the wall in the budget that has been passed, which is the budget until the end of this fiscal year in September. So now he's talking about some private funding. I don't know where he will get the money because Congress has the power of the purse and Congress has to give him the money. He cannot do it alone. The other example is the travel ban. He had to retract, he had to take it back. He came out with a second version of the travel ban. First there were 7 predominantly Muslim countries that he didn't want to let in for 3 months. Now he reduced it to 6 countries. He changed it a little bit. The courts are saying, wait a minute, we have a constitution and this may not be right. Let's fight it out in the courts. There is something as the Supreme Court. It may go to the Supreme Court. We don't know, but the Justice Ministry has said they maybe want to go to the Supreme Court. There are very, very many limits put on the president in the United States, and to me it shows that the system of checks and balances is working. He can't do what he wants to do. He can't do everything he wants to do.
Thank you. Sandra, how would you describe the new foreign policy of the Trump administration? A tighter relationship with Russia, more distance to Europe?
Well, it's concerning to me in terms of what I've seen in terms of foreign policy, and I've spoken to a few of my friends here about this that are much more of an expert in the foreign policy area than I am. And it does seem like it's foreign policy by tweet. So we've been having a lot of, discussions that take place in the American media and the international media that it's all following, a tweet in terms of foreign policy. But foreign policy is not just set by the president in the United States. You have the United States Senate, the United States Congress, and even if the Congress was in agreement with the president on one domestic policy agenda so far, and that was Obamacare and changing Obamacare, but if you noticed, it hasn't gone any farther than that in the U.S. Senate, where you would suspect there would actually be much more support if it was something within the Republican Party that everybody could actually agree to. So I'd look to senators like John McCain in the Republican Party, Senator Collins, Senator Graham, other leaders in the U.S. Senate and the Republican side that have a very, very strong understanding about the relationships here with Europe, are very skeptical about what is taking place with relationships with Russia and the ultimate interests of Russia relative to the EU, and also understanding very clearly the opportunity that would exist with the implementation of the wrong foreign policy for China to start to find its way into other areas in the EU states to fill up a void that could be left in terms of economic investment, other types of things that could be, in the long term, not beneficial to all of us in the West, but rather something that could be problematic. So I think it's very early in the process in terms of trying to understand what the Trump doctrine is going to be in foreign policy. Because I see the president as one that has been an individual that has been very transactional in terms of policy development. well, I may do this, but what are you going to do in return type of policy. And who knows, maybe we're waiting to see what's going to be happening today in terms of the climate announcement. I know everybody in the world is thinking that he will be announcing he's pulling out. Quite frankly, it would not surprise me a bit if he doesn't. I don't know what he's going to do, and because I don't know what he's going to do on that, it's the same thing with other aspects of foreign policy, but it's not just the president, even in foreign policy. The Congress will have something to say about this with the president's budget. The president's budget, I think, is dead on arrival. So what you see happening on the budget that has been proposed is not going to be the budget that will be actually utilized at the end of the day.
Thank you, Alfred and Mr. Busek.
I want to compliment what Mark said on the role of the American institutions in the design of foreign policy. You mentioned the budget. I think this already is a very important issue because the plans of the president are to reduce the budget for development cooperation for Department of State and increase the budget of defense. And of course this could lead to a quite sustained weakening of American diplomatic capacities if, for instance, Department of State is quite heavily reduced, because, let's face it, this is the place where the American establishment for decades was developing the design of international and foreign policy that we are acquainted with. So these budgetary issues are important, and there he cannot pass without the support of Congress, so this will be a crucial issue. The second thing is some lines of foreign policy, apart from, let's say, anecdotal preferences, are already visible. I mean, that he has a certain sympathy for the more authoritarian-inspired guys is evident. No, I mean, he obviously has a certain affinity with Putin and Erdogan and Duterte and this type of people. Maybe a matter of style or going beyond it, or a question of mirroring. So I would like to be as strong as these guys are, or these are the guys I can make a deal with. That is what you tried to explain, Mark, that he is always looking for the deal. But this has so far not translated into a foreign policy design. This we have to understand. While the trip to the Middle East is already gives a stronger hint of a policy design. He was mainly visiting there an alliance of Arab countries, mainly Sunni countries. He was going to Israel, and he made it quite clear, you are my club, you have to come to solutions. This was also the message to the Israelis and the Palestinians. I've been to Israel at the same time when the president was there. So he says, you have to come to solutions among yourself, and our real enemy, this is Iran. Not IS. Our real enemy is Iran. I think this is a dangerous policy design, especially when you see a movement in Iran where a rather moderate president was confirmed in the elections. They are still keeping the agreement that they signed. So to push the Iran now in the corner for the purpose to have, let's say, a joint enemy for the rest of the countries, I think that's a policy design and to a certain extent worrying. And the second thing, which seems to be the great open question, we didn't discuss it so far because we are at the beginning. He has been quite aggressive with the Chinese when he was a candidate. He learned very quickly that the two countries are so much dependent on each other that you cannot embark on a unilateral strategy against China. But the problem is North Korea. And in my understanding, the single most ardent danger for war at the moment is North Korea, because it seems that neither the Chinese nor some others in the area have enough leverage on the North Korean government to reduce their nuclear programs. And week by week, we are getting new tests and we are getting new improvements of their missiles. And even without openly saying that we are in a pre-status of war there, it seems that if you look to both sides of the Northern Pacific, that we are gradually really entering a situation of war there. In my understanding, the single most dangerous situation that we are in the world right now. And therefore, I think it was a little bit distracting now to portray Iran as the greatest evil. So it looks that the president still has to get his priorities right when addressing some of these issues. And the thing with the wall, I think, is a great story. Because if he wants to build a wall that the Mexicans should pay for, my proposal is he should build a mall.
Edward, you want to mention?
I'm in the awkward position of agreeing with everything that's been said and with everyone who's been speaking. And I think that actually speaks to a larger point that we need to keep our eye on. It is true that President Trump's daily tweets are a source of entertainment. The entertainment value gets our blood pressure up, it gets us amused, and it may focus our attention on certain issues because he has a way of making things newsworthy by saying outrageous things. But I think that shouldn't distract us from the larger picture, and I think we're doing a good job at seeing parts of that larger picture, that the president is not the sole maker of foreign policy, that in the United States, the president's control over foreign policy is significant but limited. He can do very little without support from the other institutions of government. And the relationship between Europe and America is not simply a government-to-government one, that the contacts between the two sides of the Atlantic are so broad that so much of it happens without any government involvement. Cooperation between businesses, standards that are set by businesses, the effects of the market, which is only partially regulated by government, less regulated by government in the United States than perhaps makes sense, but there's so much else that's going on. I have to confess, I was a little bit puzzled by the title of this panel, Conflict and/or Cooperation. I think that misses the relationship entirely. There really is no ground for conflict between the United States and Europe. I mean, the larger picture here is that even with Donald Trump and his tweets, and even with real differences of opinion on the two sides of the Atlantic, there is no conflict here. There are no large differences of opinion. We agree on what the global problems are. We have no major differences in terms of our values or our goals. Our economies are largely in sync with each other. Yes, there's always competition, but again, these are two economies that work well together. Again, the values are in sync. Yeah, we have some differences at the margin. We all agree, well, nearly all of us agree, that climate change is happening and needs to be addressed. The real question is, how do we prioritize that, and are some policies better than others? Those are real disagreements, but they're not fundamental disagreements. It's not a question of conflict. And again, what strikes me is that if you look at the larger history here, U.S.-European relations are actually in a very good spot right now. I mean, it's so easy to forget some of the places we've been in the past. 1956 was a more complicated year for U.S.-European relations. The 1980s were a more complicated decade for U.S.-European relations. There were real issues of disagreement about how to provide security, about the role that Europe should play in the globe. I mean, there were real differences of opinion. Even during the presidency of George W. Bush, there were real differences. And I think the differences we see today are actually substantively much smaller. I mean, again, the entertainment value of the tweets brings the small differences into high regard, but I think we would get carried away if we focused on the conflict. The real issue here is how much effective cooperation can we develop? Which are the institutions that exist? Which of the so many institutions that tie us together will be effective, can be made effective, as we work together to coordinate policies and address common concerns? So, I mean, the one place where I am concerned that we may be on different wavelengths deals with the understanding of Russia and the kind of threat that Russia poses today. But on that, I am reassured that, like Europe, the vast majority of the American people and a substantial majority in Congress have a more concern about Russia under Putin than the president does. But again, I'm impressed by all the good things we could be talking about. And one of the good things is we're not simply relying on the U.S. for leadership, that by default, others will be taking a leadership role on some of these issues, and that is a good thing.
Thank you. Ed?
I fully join your points. I think that's extremely important. I think, again, I repeat what I was saying. I think Trump is not the United States as a whole. I think we are making here a mistake. I think it's nice to report, to be angry, and so on and so on. And even by his optics, he is giving a lot of support to this for caricaturists and so on. But it's not the case. I think being connected for a very long time within the United States, some things concerning this are bothering me. We all grew up after the Second World War, my generation, having many thanks to the United States, not only because they brought chewing gum or something like that in movies and so on, but I think they helped a lot concerning developing democracy. That's ended. I think my generation has a very positive mood in this direction, seeing that the things are more difficult. If you are discussing it with the younger generations, the distance to the Americans is growing. We should not forget, and I'm not happy here about this, what to do on this subject. I'm visiting professor at Duke University in North Carolina since '96. And I'm traveling around to several cases. I even had the not very nice job after the Waldheim affair to go to different Jewish communities and different places to discuss what's on and so on and so on here. I think the interest of American institutions on Europe is going down without any doubt. At several universities with which I'm connected, European centers are closed, finished. It's not any more interesting. China, Russia, Pacific Basin, and so on in this direction is going. I think I don't want to blame the Americans for it. It's up to us, I think, to do it more. Even the number of, I'm Jean Monnet professor, not in America, but in Europe and here in Graz. I think the number of Jean Monnet professorships is going down. It's a mistake. I think we need a more European strategy to go in this direction and to come in closer discussion. That's for sure quite necessary. I think to connect the Americans with our discussions with different point of views. Because it can be a mutual contribution and so on and so on. Maybe we can also ask the Americans to do more. If I'm looking at German TV, I think if we won't have John Kornblum acting from Berlin, I think there would be less American presence, even in Germany, which has quite another role here for sure existing. I think here we have to do something to go further on this direction, because we have some common interest and we have also different interested. I think I'm a little bit continuing on what Alfred Gusenbauer said. I think we can discuss what's good in Trump activities and what's bad. I think the question of selling weapons to Saudi Arabia is not helpful, not only for the area and the Middle East, but also in general. And the argument, this is jobs, 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 is a dangerous argument, because I might find some places here in Europe also saying, okay, let's sell weapons, jobs, jobs, jobs. And for sure, Germany is partly doing this also in this direction. They are not making such a propaganda out of this like Trump did it. And I think here we have to look a little bit more carefully. And you touched rightly also the problem of Russia. I think we have also to discuss the relation to Russia more rational as it is sometimes done. I think it's only a discussion, all the sanctions yes, sanctions no, and are we able to sell Styrian apples to the Russians, and so it's interesting and important for Styria, but that's not the only problem. I think the question of the mutual understanding to know what is Russia is also one of the problems, like the problem, what is America nowadays? To say quite straight, sometimes I have the feeling we are only looking always to the East Coast and to the West Coast. But America, there's something in between. That's also America, and this is the support for Trump. And might be necessary that we are going there and raising some questions to them, not to blame them, but I think to open that what is called dialogue.
Thank you. You want to react?
All I was going to add to this is to put a more positive, optimistic spin on it. The fact that Americans study Europe less is a sign of how well we feel we know Europe. Perhaps we think we know Europe better than we actually do. But I think what we're seeing is, in the younger generation, we're all family. And you don't have to have a center to study your own family. You have spats and disagreements, and you live with your misunderstandings. But the fact that we study each other less actually is a sign of normalcy in the relationship, rather than, I think, a sign for concern.
Mark.
I just would add that one of the shocks of that may have come out of the election, as you had referenced, the press was saying, well, a shock wave that has taken place. You know, I think it's a reflection of the need for America to study itself, and for possibly Europe to begin looking at itself as well. We should all be looking a little bit with introspection about what is happening, the underlying elements that are taking place relative to the demographics that are changing substantially, the impact relative to the digital economy, the disruptive technologies that are changing the way people work, the increased anxieties that are out there in our societies. We did not just have a little bit of a surprise with Donald Trump's election. We can look at Brexit. We can look at some of the populist movements that have taken place all around the world. There is something else below in our economies that we need to be focusing more clearly on and understanding it. When I go back to Massachusetts in the Senate, we will be doing a demographic analysis. We're actually working with MIT in taking a look at our underlying demographics within our state, trying to figure out what is happening in the future, several years out. What are the changes that are taking place in both here in Europe and in America? The whole issue of immigration is another underlying issue that comes with very strong feelings, whether it's refugees or the potential of some terrorists coming into, our countries through such policies. But as I look at the demographic analysis just scratching the surface. If we don't have comprehensive, smart immigration reform in America, we've got bigger problems in the future in terms of the sustainability of our economy. So these are things that we also not only can look inward on both sides of the Atlantic, but we can also work together on. So I think there are opportunities here for us to increase the cooperation that already exists in trying to find answers to these problems that are popping up with these election results and so on. They're symptoms of a larger problem that we need to have addressed.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add a thought. As a journalist, we're observing what is happening in the United States, but what I see when I come here, I'm always asked by just about everybody, are the Americans crazy? How could they elect such a president? And it's very, very difficult to really give an answer there. You have touched on some of the points, because some of what he says, he is right with some of what he says, except he exaggerates. He goes beyond all measure. And then you are caught with what he says and how he says it. It's outrageous. You have to talk about that. And we never see, or hardly ever see, and this is the role of the media that I'm criticizing, including all of us, and the American media above all. It was the Washington Post who said on the day after the election, well, we have learned a lesson. We did not go and listen to the people. We did not go out to, fly over country, whatever you call it. We were not listening to these people. We are doing it again. We live in our bubble on the East Coast, on the West Coast. All the intellectuals. Who reads the New York Times? 2 million out of 320 million, something like that. This is not America. This is a bubble, and we have to go out more and interact. We're trying to do it, but it's not the sexy stories that you get out there. It's people always saying, okay, yes, we don't like everything what Donald Trump says, but there are some things that, yeah, he's good. He will just make our country better again. And they have a lot of points where they agree with him.
The funny thing is, if you could change this to Austria, to Vienna, just take not Manhattan, take Vienna, Neubau, Vienna, Maria Hilf, and it's the same story, yeah, with the bubble and going out there for the real stories. Sorry, please, Alfred.
I wanted to compliment on what you said. America is as it always has been. There are, let's say, two Americas, the America of the coasts and the center of America. And this has already been the same for a long time. And of course, Europeans feel much more affiliated with the coastal America than with the Central America. And normally, presidents that are coming from that cultural background are much closer to us than others. But both realities exist. And they are almost equally strong. And let's face it, the elections, Hillary Clinton got 3 million votes more than Donald Trump. Due to the established electoral system, he became the president, fine. But let's say the country is more or less half and half. So let's not put it now the other way and say we did not listen to the people. The one half is the people and the other half is the people. And sometimes in the American history, you had presidents that were more coming from the coastal, intellectual, liberal tradition, and then you had presidents that are coming more from the center country approach. What maybe is new is this exaggerated social media using testosteronian way of public appearance that makes Europeans and others a little bit frightened. But the realities are both there. And in a way, the Americans, if they exist, and the Europeans, if they exist in this reduced formula, are in a way looking in the same way to each other. So now the Europeans are looking to America and are really eager for having the new Twitter of Trump and what provocation he's going to do, etc. When I was teaching for quite some years in the US, and we were discussing the issues that I should talk about, you know what was the most beloved issue that in all the universities they wanted to talk about? About the Euro crisis. And each year they said, you again have to talk about the Euro crisis. And when will the Euro break up? And I felt that they really were disappointed that I'm not coming and telling them tomorrow it's going to break up, because this was more or less the perception of what is going to, and it's, you know, it's the mirror. The way they are looking upon us is how we are looking upon them, and we have an expectation-driven perception that, as we all know, never is covering entirely the reality.
So they don't see our new smart, slim, fit prime ministers, Macron, Kern, maybe Kurz, no? No,
Well,
okay.
they follow the slim fit of the editors-in-chief of our newspapers.
Okay, Alfred, I take this as a compliment, sorry.
Of course.
So now I think it's a good point where we should change to the to you. Is there anyone who wants to raise his hand and give us a question? You can do this in German, yeah, if you want to, and I try to translate. Yeah, yeah, please.
Since I lived in the United States for a couple of years, and more so on the East Coast and in the Midwest. And also,
You have a microphone if you want to.
there is probably one thing that really I think we should consider in listening to each other, which is, first point is a social issue, and the second one is probably, you mentioned that, I think, Rob, it's the technology. Why are we not really working together on these subjects? Why do we have two systems in the sky? Why do we not work together on the social issues sometimes? Because what we learned is that in the Midwest, if you live in the Midwest, it's a totally different living compared to California or to, let's say, in Boston. We lived in Boston also. Why is that difference is not overcome? Why haven't that been overcome over this last 30 or 40 years? Why do not we actually talk to each other more? Why are there not groups actually exchanging ideas and going back and forth and doing something just to get a little bit closer? Why does this trough still exist? That's my question.
Who wants to? Please, Mark.
Well, I'm here. I think there is a lot of relationships that are taking place relative to these new issues. Whether they're being done at the federal level or not of our governments, I think that may not be happening. But the institutional levels, in particular in higher education, that happens a lot. We are doing a lot now in Massachusetts, for example, with disruptive technologies, cybersecurity, digital platforms. We have, as a state, actually entered into formal agreements, formal partnerships. I know it's not here in Europe, but it's with another country. In Canada, we are actually the state of Massachusetts and the Quebec, Parliament are working together on climate, on transportation-related issues, on cybersecurity-related issues, and disruptive technologies. We have an agreement with the Azorian region of Portugal that we have put together in writing, talking about ways in which we can work together and meet together and talk about different issues. So this is what I'm saying about the states. I mean, various states have unique connections with various regions of Europe. In Massachusetts, there's a significant population of Portuguese Americans in that area, so there is therefore that connection with Portugal, and some with Italy, and in other regions of Europe, obviously. And the same is true with a number of states. In Chicago, I don't have to tell you about Chicago for the Austrians here. So there are a number of things that are happening. I can't tell you how many times in my state office in Boston, I hear about people from Europe that are coming through, and because of some of the committees I sit on, I meet with them, that have been to MIT, they've been over to Harvard, they're talking with places like the Cambridge Innovation Center, and looking at ways in which they can develop new technologies here back home. They're over there learning, coming back here, and vice versa. You have American interests in different institutions that have come here to Europe and are interested in what is taking place. I just happened to look at the new science tower that is being developed here in Graz by one of your scientists, SFL Corporation. And Mario Mueller told me that one of the reasons why he looked at that whole system was one of his trips to Boston and looking at the Cambridge Innovation Center. So these things are happening. Should they be happening more intensely? Should we be learning from each other more? I certainly would agree with that.
Very quickly, I would simply add, there are, however, in the fields of science and technology and social policy, there are actually some structural obstacles to closer cooperation. So much of science and technology in the United States is so decentralized, and so much of it is being handled through private or quasi-private agencies. So getting coordination even within America is quite difficult, much less coordinating across the Atlantic. And in terms of coordination on social policy or learning on social policy, again, the differences in approach. While we have the same values, or many of the same values, the American approach obviously is quite different. So cooperating on those particular issues is very, very hard.
Thank you.
Well, we have some minutes, so I have to talk. Yeah.
We can,
No. No, sorry. Well,
maybe there are some questions. No,
I didn't see any
questions. There was.
No.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, go ahead.
2 or 3 remarks. It's always these questions about divided nations, yeah? And the bubble in DC, the bubble in Vienna, and the rural areas,
Graz.
Or in Graz, yeah. So this is, first of all, it's not only the US a divided nation, red states, blue states, and I mean, okay, Donald Trump was elected president. The popular vote was won by Hillary Clinton. So probably it's a divided nation. But what about Austria? I mean, we are so proud to have a new president, Alexander van der Bellen. And we're a good country, we're a green country, we're a modern country, we're a wonderful country. But it's just a few thousand votes. In the other case, we would have had President Hofer, and what would we tell the world now? I don't know. Probably it would be a very similar situation to Americans going abroad and talking about Trump. First point. Then I think it's very interesting, Trump and his tweets. And this new instrument of foreign policies or politics in general. When I was in Florida last year around the elections, first of all, first I was in DC, and I did not meet, literally, I didn't meet anybody who said Trump will be president and I'm in favor of Trump. Nobody. Even in the International Republican Institute, I didn't find anybody who said, I'm in favor of Trump. No, they were talking about who will be candidate in 2020 and so, yeah. And then I went to Florida, and we had some days with the Marco Rubio campaign for US Senate. In DC, they told us it's a divided Republican Party. Nobody likes Trump, and it was an ugly kid or something like this. In Florida, they said, this is not a divided party. Full Republican ballot from school board to president. And Rubio and Trump, they always were best friends. Very interesting. And then I talked to the head of the Rubio campaign, and we asked him, what's the difference between the presidential campaign and the campaign, Marco's campaign for US Senate? And he said, well, the only difference is I'm not worried when I see Marco getting his cell phone and texting. Okay, so any more questions?
Yeah, I think we're 2, 3, please.
So earlier in the discussion, it was actually raised about the concept that there is a potential that we are in a pre-war stage with North Korea, and I notice among my colleagues and peers in the US that actually seems to be a general consensus and something that people are starting to acknowledge as being the case. Currently, we're calling it a conflict, but it could escalate at any point. But I've noticed that from a European standpoint, it's been relatively quiet in how the rest of the Europeans feel in terms of this conflict and how they would actually handle the conflict. So I'd love to be able to hear and understand what you think, or what the rest of the European consensus would be. Like, do you believe that we're actually in this pre-war stage, or do you think that there is the potential to kind of stop the conflict and move away as we've done numerous times with North Korea?
Thank you. Maybe Alfred, I'd like to you could answer this. Yeah, take that. Yeah, please. We're gonna collect them. The other questions, the other two, please. And over there.
Hi. I wanted to propose an answer to what you posed, Mr. Busek, about European values and see whether you saw that any of the panelists saw the same difference. I see European values as generally rooted towards dignity, versus in the US, it's more of a liberty focus. This is the focal point that we tie our common purposes to and justify them through our social narratives. Dignity is more of a process of realizing human value through instruments like the social state, and for example, in your privacy law, an area that I know a lot about, it's much more rooted in notions of dignity, versus liberty is about freedom from government and more of an individual focus. If you look at Trump, for example, he takes liberty far to extremes, whereas I think you generally agree he's offensive to dignity in many ways. So I was wondering if any of you saw a similar difference in that.
Thank you. And the third one, yeah.
Hi. My question is, since over the course of history and Marshall Plan, the cooperation between US and Europe was very tight in handling the Europe's own problem, like Balkan problem there was 3 years ago, and now there are still a lot of problems Europe that it has on its own, meaning Balkan is still a problem. It's a silent problem, but it is there still. Turkey also, and the internal politics. So the backing up of the US, meaning we are going to deal with ourselves, America first, will it lead to stronger cooperation of Europe by itself to solve these problems? Or is it going to lead to that someone else is going to take this place instead of US, like, I don't know, maybe China, Russia? What is your opinion on this?
Thank you. Everyone wants to pick up a question? Please.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think on the North Korean issue, I think the Europeans are lacking the sensitivity on that subject because it's far away. Europeans think that they have no stake in that confrontation. But of course, all those circles that are connected with security would put North Korea as the most eminent danger to world peace right now. But are we involved in that? Is there a conversation? No. We just think that we have to give some good advice to the US, how to behave, and maybe to try to get an understanding with the Chinese to be helpful on that. But there is no, let's say, real European input. Europeans see the problem, but it's far away from them, and on the security priority list for the Europeans clearly is the Middle East and all that conflicts that might lead to an additional refugee wave coming to Europe. There always is, of course, Russia on the table, especially if once in a while Mr. Putin is getting a little bit more aggressive also in his tonality. But North Korea for the Europeans is definitely out of scope. And the second thing, will automatically the Europeans now start to consider what they do on their own? My humble experience in politics is that nothing is happening automatically. And it will be an enormous endeavor to get the Europeans to deal with some of the most ardent issues. Mr. Busek mentioned them. It's refugees, it's security, it's the economic challenge. And of course, everything that helps the European to wake up is of course mostly welcome. This is why now the Trump debate is instrumentalized for, let's say, the new Europe arise. So at the end we have to work on our agenda. I mean, who was blocking us from doing it so far? Let's forget about that question. It will not be a satisfactory answer. So it seems that Europe very often needs an input from the outside to do what it should do. But will it automatically happen? No. But chances at the moment, I think, are better because we have a new French president in office with a pro-European agenda, with a huge support in the population. We have political stability in Germany. And I think if this engine of Europe can be revitalized, perspectives for addressing some of the most ardent issues are better than they were.
Thank you. Hannelore, you want to take maybe the difference between liberty in the States and dignity, or you can also call it social welfare state in Europe. Do you think that's an important point in our relationship?
I think it's a very good point, and I think yesterday somebody said it in different words, but more or less the same thing. When in America, it's always how can I do things? Why are you? No, let me rethink that in English or in German. In Austria, it's always, oh, can I really do that? And in America, it's, why can I not do that? And I think this is a main difference between Americans and Europeans, and it has to do a little bit with liberty. This feeling, individualism, why can I not do things? But this is also what makes America great in my experience, because you are not hindered by everything around you, all the laws and obligations, and you have to think of this and this and this and that, but you just do it. It's not like, this hasn't been done, can we really do it? It's not, well, try it. And if you don't make it, if you don't risk it, you can't win if you don't risk.
I think I share the view of Hannelore, Veit and Alfred Gusenbauer, but one of the differences also concerning the European values is the example of Obamacare. I think Obamacare for the Europeans would not be a discussion. I think we would keep it, we won't discuss it in the direction. Sometimes it's appearing that we shall cut pay less, and so on and so on. But this strict discussion, which was carried out by Trump and also by others, is in Europe for sure not existing. It's a different kind of responsibility concerning social affairs existing, maybe coming out of the consequences of some economic crisis and 2 world wars, which happened partly, mainly in Europe also. That should not be underestimated here in existing. I think the waking up concerning the obligations concerning global affairs and so on, I think has to happen for the Europeans by the fact that they are only 7% of the population of the world and still a little bit more than 20% of the economic power. This is in one direction. In the other direction, and there's a big difference, for the Americans, I think they will lower their global responsibility without any doubt, and I think it's fair for the Americans. I think that has to be seen. It is for sure justified, because I think they did a lot in the past. If I'm looking to the Second World War and the consequences, I think it was mainly done. And maybe we have to discuss together with different solutions what to do the relations concerning the open questions, Middle East, Russia, and so on and so on. But for sure, it has to be said, we are closer to the Middle East and to Russia as the Americans are. So far, I think questions to ourselves are really necessary, which are not raised so much. Hopefully, some changes like Macron might be a change. It's for sure not visible until now that it might happen, but it's for sure necessary concerning global affairs. Maybe it's the next theme for the next meeting, Pfingstdialog.
2018, yeah. Thank you. Havik Hüselet had some very strong, will that we, So please make it short.
Okay. No, I just wanted to talk about liberty, freedom. In the US and in Europe. I mean, that's, of course, there is a historical dimension. I mean, the Revolutionary War was fought for freedom. So the American story, the story of the United States is liberty, is freedom. And in Europe, we are probably Europeans did like their kings and queens and emperors, dukes or whatever.
Except the French.
They accept the French. Yeah. Okay, sometimes. But give us some security, give us food, probably some games, and we will not ask for too much freedom. And that's the the American history is the absolute opposite to that. So America is always freedom and liberty, and so that's today the difference between Europe and the US as well. It's a historical phenomenon.
Okay, Mark, you want to find some last words about friendly words about Europe, maybe? About Europe, some friendly words. Not so illiberal as...
Always friendly words for Europe, because that's been our history. We have a tremendous history working together, tremendous cooperation over the years, and that can be our future. And I know, and I've said it before, and I know sometimes I sound a bit optimistic on this issue, but I would urge those here in Austria and those representing other European countries that there are natural relationships that are already developed between American institutions and European institutions, natural relations that are already there with various states throughout the United States of America. No matter what happens in the future, let us build stronger relationships there. Let us go forward and try to maximize the benefit that can come out of those relationships, because when we do that, we both succeed on both sides of the Atlantic.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you. Thank you for this very interesting group. I think you can call us Group Harmony No? Yes. And as always, I ask you to read the newspapers, and especially die Presse, or also die Kleine Zeitung, or even the Standard, maybe not the other one, Kronenzeitung and so on. Yeah, thank you very much, and I think you have a break now. Thank you.